Greetings, dear listeners. This is Jonah Goldberg, host of the Remnant podcast, brought to you by the Dispatch and Dispatch Media. It is Wednesday, May 17th, 9 a.m. Well, technically 9:05 a.m. And we think we put enough air between today and the wildly successful, subscriber-generating, swag-moving, truth-bombing, special... all things Fox and Cable News live Remnant with brother Stirewalt and some guy named Steve Hayes. And so we figured it's been enough time. We can have Stirewalt back on this podcast. He's my colleague at AEI. He writes for the Dispatch. He does this thing on News Nation. I almost said One American News, and then I just figured you'd take out the shotgun.
It's me and Tommy Laren.
And
there hanging out.
And welcome back to the Remnant, sir.
It is good to be with you. And I want you to know that as you were talking about what we did, I have a tick about remembering. Do you remember when MSNBC gave Karen Finney a TV show?
Vaguely.
They did. Democratic strategist Karen Finney got a TV show, and it was called Disrupt. It was just the name. And for a long time, I went around in meetings and places where I shouldn't. And people would say like, well, we've got to do something. I'd be, you mean disrupt? So that's what we did with our truth bombs. We disrupted.
Well, if we're going to go down this memory lane, you do recall there was a time when MSNBC put Alan Keyes on the air with the clever take on truth in advertising of a show called Alan Keyes is Making Sense. Wasn't that what it was called?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And then what's this? Was Michael Savage? Was that just Savage Nation?
Savage Nation.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
That's right. The graveyards are littered with ill-conceived and poorly executed cable news content because the bar is low. What is it? The odds are good, but the goods are odd.
We're not going to spend a lot of time on the Tucker stuff because it just came to my head, but it does. Just thinking about it in real time just now, when you think about Alan Keyes, Michael Savage, to
Matt Drudge,
Matt Drudge. That's right.
Show.
That's not where I'm going. I'm thinking about Glenn Beck. You know, the argument that you're still hearing from a lot of people is that Tucker can take to the airwaves of Twitter and still have the same effect and impact and role that he did at Fox. The examples of other people who had mainstream platforms and then went the independent journalism route, who I assume still made lots of money. Glenn Beck made lots of money. I get the sense he's spent lots of money too, but I'm not saying you can't get rich. I mean, Bill O'Reilly probably makes money off of his podcast, and Mark Stein's got a whole thing going out there. But like the downside of the sort of independent Joe Rogan model is that you do self-marginalize in a way.
Well, so I think you have the Ben Shapiro model, which is sort of where you're getting the best of both worlds in this sense. So Shapiro would never sign with Fox because he wanted to have control of his own thing. So he's making insane amounts of money. When I heard how much money they were willing to pay noted weird person Steven Crowder to come and said $50 million. If you've got $50 million to pay Steven Crowder, you got a lot of money. So Ben Shapiro is making all of this money from this vertically integrated universe. And by the way, speaking of merch, he's trying to sell everything. I today, this very day, ordered a massive bundle of Dispatch swag because I was gifted a lovely Yeti cup, and it's cool and everything. But the t-shirts are awesome, and of course the Treats mug, the Remnant Treats mug, is a must-have. So I recommend to all.
Just so you know, there is a groundswell of populist outrage that Gracie the cat gets no placement on the mug.
Come on.
So
let's be, we're all adults here.
Yeah.
We're all adults here. The cat content goes someplace else. So if you have the Shapiro model, you're making that money on a vertically integrated universe, subscriber based and merchandise based. On the other hand, Shapiro drives content. What was Tucker Carlson putting on his show every day? He wasn't putting his team of reporters weren't out beating the bushes to find the stories. They were hoovering up the things that were percolating out of Ben Shapiro, percolating out of other places that were scoring online. The degree to which television news is a repurposing of click tested content online. That's in a big way how everybody fell down the pit. Was that it's too easy, right? If you want to know what we should talk about today, open up Twitter, see what tweets are trending, open up memorandum, see what stories are driving the most clicks, and just put that on your show.
I used to make this point in a much more high-minded way back when, in the early days of cable news, or I should say earlier days, where I would just, when I would talk to young people who wanted to be journalists and stuff, they would say, well, hasn't cable killed, newspaper reporting, and isn't internet killing, all this, and video, everyone's pivoting to video and all. I was like, look, at the end of the day, it all still runs on the written word, right? And I used to have all these jokes about how, like, at CNN or MSNBC or Fox, like producers would consider it deep, serious research to find an article on page A17 of the New York Times, right? That was like, look what I dug up, and now it's like they found a tweet, but it's still, New York Times and Washington Post and Wall Street Journal still drive most of the legitimate, high-minded, serious journalism on most of these networks most days. I'm not saying that they have their own investigative teams and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, the head Roman with the big giant drum bonger thingies setting the pace for the oar pullers is still basically newspapers.
I think I found you and Steve's conversation with Ben Smith really interesting. And I'm working on Ben's book and find it the point to be very convincing, which is every time we think we've reinvented it, we haven't, right? There's a new, there's sort of a informational arbitrage that goes on where it's like, oh, everything's over here. Now we're all moving over here. And if you can be an early adopter and you can get in the space and you can do this thing first, there is an advantage right there at the beginning. But when water finds its own level, if you have to look, I think that what his semaphore is doing, I certainly think what the Dispatch is doing. You have to mention Politico and a couple of other places too that have found a way. If you have reporting, right? If you have new information, you can. This is what the conundrum of the media is. When rich people want to invest in the media, they want to do two things. They want to make money and they want to shape the conversation, right? What do they? I want to shape the conversation. Well, the two are not necessarily complementary goals, because the shortest path to making a bunch of money is to try to surf the zeitgeist just one wave ahead of everybody else and be there and repackage. There's a new, I forget what it's called. It's called Messenger or something. That is going to try to do it again. We're going to try to we're going to harvest other content and try to surf in on that wave just a little faster than everybody else. In the old days of the newspaper business, you called it a rewrite desk, right? You would just have a bunch of drones rewriting. But if you want to shape the discussion, you have to spend a lot of money, because you have to have reporting and you have to have thoughtful people and you have to do that stuff. And very often investors get frustrated by that. And they say it's the struggle that high-minded people always have in the news business or anything. I want to do a good thing. I want to do a better thing, and I want to do something that's good for the country, good for people. And then when you find out that that's not what sells, or at least that's not what sells quickly, the temptation to abandon course and be a little gross. And of course, grossness happens just like in politics. Somebody says, okay, what am I willing to do to win this election? What will I do to get there? Well, I'll do this, but I won't do that. And this is how Potomac Fever works. They get in one of the massive misunderstandings about what's wrong with Washington and how Washington works and all of this stuff. People tell me it's the money. People tell me it's the power. Nope, it's staying. They just want to stay. They just want to die here. Looking at Dianne Feinstein and her struggles and all of this stuff, you could not have a more effulgent example. Robert Byrd, we can find them, but people who are like, I am determined to shuffle off this mortal coil while in office. And it turns out not to be a super set of motivations for good government.
So since you dragged us kicking and screaming into politics, while I was perfectly happy setting up my hammock and my navel for more gazing, I talked to a fancy pants Democratic operative person not long ago, and I asked them, what the hell's going on with, this is before Feinstein returned. And like MacArthur to Korea. So anyway, so I asked, what's the deal? Like, why? What, like, obviously if she were the head of the Environment and Public Works Committee or whatever that's called in the Senate, no one would give a rat's ass. But like, she's holding up all the judges, and the liberals really care about judges in much the same way that Republicans really care about judges too. It's like, who likes fried chicken? Black people. Who else likes fried chicken? Everybody. Who cares about judges? Both parties. So, but and this person's take was they thought it was just the staff didn't want to go. The staff liked being in charge of the committee. The staff controlled the information flow to Feinstein, and Feinstein was sufficiently out of it that she just kind of listened to whoever was, telling her what to do.
I'm going to dangle some bait for John Podhoretz right now, which is the reason that Tom Selleck did not have a more successful movie career in the 1980s and 1990s was because he wouldn't give up Magnum PI. And part of the reason he wouldn't give up Magnum PI, 8 seasons. I highly recommend the hot crossover with Murder, She Wrote. If he gave up, then all of his friends and their families and everybody who had built their life around lucrative job as a primetime television star would lose their jobs. So he felt a certain amount of obligation. There's that part. But there's another part too, which is I am not going to let those people win. They have been trying to force me out of here. They've been trying to pry me out of here for all of this time. So on the one hand, you have the Fetterman story, right? You have the story in which his consultants, the people around him, I understand why his wife did not want him to drop out of that race because it was part of the narrative of his recovery and he's going to get better and we can do it all. But obviously the people around him should have had the decency to say, it's more important to me that you get better than you have the seat, because Connor Lamb, perfectly ready to walk in and beat, as it would be revealed, Mehmet Oz. So there is that part, and your Democratic friend is not wrong. But there's the other part, which is if people have been trying to get rid of Dianne Feinstein since she was the mayor of San Francisco. Her experience as a relatively moderate Democrat in California has been to be under siege from the left.
Mm-hmm.
And when AOC and Ayanna Pressley and whomever, Ro Khanna, people come out to say, she's got to go, she's got to go, she's got to go. To her, that just sounds like the same thing that she's been hearing for 40 years. And she is determined that she will stay. And this is the problem. The problem is people get these positions. And the beauty of the American system is supposed to be that not anyone, but millions of people, right? Hundreds of thousands of people could be a United States senator. There's lots and lots and lots of people who could serve in the United States Senate or be the Secretary of Environment, could be the secretary, could do these jobs. There's a handful of jobs that require super specialized knowledge. You want to be the defense secretary, you want to be the treasury secretary, you got to do it. A lot of this other stuff should be accessible to generalists. But much as Donald Trump is making us all endure right now, the belief that only I can fix it, only I can endure it, only I can make this happen is the core sickness at the heart of Potomac fever. People cannot relinquish power because the example of Washington is, if it won't work without me, then it won't work, right? If it won't work without me, then it won't work. And Dianne Feinstein it's not that she should have left when AOC told her to. She shouldn't have run last time. Chuck Grassley shouldn't have run last time. If you're over 85, probably time to go take your reward, right? Probably time to go enjoy the rest of your time here. And it's hard for them to.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I had Elizabeth Nolan Brown from Reason on here a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about how incentivizing people to have more babies is hard. And part of the point I was trying to make was that it is absolutely true that people respond to incentives, but not all incentives are economic. All these people some of them make way too much money while they're in public office to like pass a smell test, but they could all make more money in the private sector, particularly after 20 years in the Senate or whatever, right? But the incentives to be, in the room where it happens, to have people standing outside of your office always desperate to hear your opinion on something, that's just crazy addictive for a lot of people.
Well, there's the Goldberg bingo card component as well, which is the Parliament of Pundits and the love of celebrity, the Gatesian love of celebrity over power, the desire to do our jobs and not their own. There's that component, but there's also this. And former presidents have talked about it. I have talked to retired members about it. Even for relatively balanced, normal people, staff is addicting, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're a corporate titan or whether you're in politics, the idea that there are people, the idea that you're like, how am I going to get, like, for example, when you make Guy sort through your M&Ms, right? Mm-hmm. And do that. If you retire and leave, even if you have all the money that you'll ever need, you'd have to hire your own M&M sorter.
Right.
And you wouldn't be able to get Guy a visa to do that for various reasons. And you'd have to do it yourself. So even normal people, right? Let's take George W. Bush. Now they have Secret Service protection that creates that around. There's some of that around them, but I gotta go. Or Barack Obama. I'm gonna drive someplace. I'm gonna go buy a Zagnut. I'm gonna go do these things. Some of it is nice, but I bet the nice wears off pretty quickly. It's like people who, for work, have been flying around in private jets or government planes, and all of a sudden, first class seems like hell. Like I can't believe that I'd have to do it. So giving up.
I have a few friends who had sort of high-ranking cabinet, like not the cabinet secretary, but the assistant deputy of this or the undersecretary of that kind of thing. And it's weird how many of them say the thing they miss most was having a driver. Because you could go to all these Washington parties without worrying about parking, without worrying about anything, and then just drop in for 15 minutes and then leave and then go home. And like having to worry about your own vehicle apparently is quite burdensome when you haven't been doing it for a while.
When you're in Washington and you see that young man in an ill-fitting sport coat that is the wrong color blue with a tie that does not quite reach his belt buckle, and he is standing there looking awkwardly into his Diet Coke, that gentleman is there to drive a congressman, right, congresswoman, or someplace, right? Now, I will now deeply, of all of my unpopular opinions, here's a double dose. We need to increase the size of the House of Representatives by 50%. minimum now. And by the way, kudos to the Washington Post for taking this seriously and even talking about what the architectural fix would be in the House chamber.
Oh, I missed that.
We need to do that, and we need to cut their staffs.
Yeah,
their staffs have to go way down, because part of the reason we have the quote unquote populist moment that we have been living in since 2008 is the entity that is supposed to be the vent for populist energy, the House of Representatives, has turned into a mini Senate, right? We have too few members representing too many people, and they have these big staffs, and they wear their dumb big lapel pins and walk around like they're really, really important people, where what they're supposed to be is the canaries in the coal mines of public opinion. They're supposed to be down amongst them, and they're supposed to do that, but they don't do that, and instead they turn into these celebrities, and they don't do enough. They don't do their jobs.
So, I mean, you may recall that you're singing my song. My very first op-ed ever published, 1992, day after the election, Wall Street Journal, to reform Congress, enlarge it. I have been hustling on this beat for 30 years. Did you know that the real First Amendment was not this thing about religion and speech and whatnot? It was about the size of Congress. And
the only one that George Washington spoke out in favor of. That was his, like, right. You got to do this too.
The only time he spoke at the Constitutional Convention was when he said, look, districts with 35,000 people in them, way too big. Got to cut it back to 25K. And in fairness, in 1789, whatever, 1788, like a district of 35,000 people was probably harder to get around today than a district of 355,000 people, and then some, right? So you don't have to go back to the original size, although I would have no problem with it. That would be a Congress of about 7,500, 8,000 people, maybe 9,000 people.
Like the New Hampshire model.
Yeah. But I agree with you. It's way too big. I mean, it's way too small right now.
You have been a trailblazer on this unpopular opinion, and I follow the path that you have trodden. But you don't need to index it, right? It doesn't have to keep going up forever, but it hasn't gone up since the 1920s. And if you increase the size of the House by about 50%, it would have a lot of good effects. Number one, on gerrymandering. It would have a great effect on gerrymandering because there'd just be a lot more districts. There would be a lot more districts, be a lot harder to pack and crack because you'd have fewer people to work with. So
right, the smaller the district, the fewer puzzle pieces you can illegitimately stick on the sides.
That's right. So if you have, instead of districts of 900,000 people, if you have districts of 600 or 500,000 people in the cities and in that stuff, so there's a good effect when it comes to gerrymandering, which should reduce the idiocy of the members of Congress by some degree. And the other thing that is important is the electoral map, right? So you add electors. When you add House members, you add electors, and states that get more electors, it will be more reflective of the current population distribution in the United States. Instead of we're going to pull one away from this state to stick it down there, we do need a period where states that have grown and are growing, we need to plus up, and that would all be good.
All right, I can sense a listener, maybe even two out there, who perhaps frustrated that they can't find that weird curly fry at the bottom of their normal straight fry bag, but perhaps frustrated with this podcast that we have not actually dealt with much rank punditry, and so we should have at it. Where to begin? Let's begin with the Durham report. Do you have opinions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, kudos to John Durham. He did what I have not read all 300 pages, but I have read some of it, and I've read a lot of the coverage of it, and I've read people whose opinions I esteem and those who I do not. I have concluded he did a very thorough job. And much like the January 6th committee, work that needed to be done, right? Like somebody has to write it all down. And for the sake of history and for the sake of avoiding mistakes and for the sake of credibility, you have to do it. And Durham was in a tough spot because the consequences for the misconduct have already been levied, right? James Comey trashed his reputation, right? James Comey, who once was Sam the Eagle from the Muppet Show, imperiously strutting around Washington, is now at best a figure of derision. Andy McCabe, his lieutenant, criminally prosecuted, Strzok, and Lisa Page, and the awareness of how the FISA court was abused. And by the way, I assume that the FISA court, if it can be abused in a matter like that it has been abused in other cases, right? That if the FBI was able to take this approach with a very sensitive case, that it was taken in other cases, and all of that. But the consequences, Christopher Wray has been trying to remediate the problems that the Durham report identified since he took office. So Durham was in a little bit of a difficult position, which is, here's the details. Here's everything that happened. Here's what you should know. Here's how they bootstrap their way into this prosecution. Here's how they cut these corners. Here's how Democratic talking points work their way in. So he documented it all. And then Trump supporters are like, as Coach Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, like, burn it down. Why are the police not coming and arresting Joe Biden? Why is Hillary Clinton not in leg irons? And for Durham, he did what he was sent to do. He did what Bill Barr sent him to do. He did a good job of it, and still doesn't get credit from the people who wanted him to do the job.
Okay, so I'm going to plead bias, because ever since the Durham report came out, a video of me from 2017 on Stephanopoulos' show, saying that if forced to choose between the credibility of James Comey and Donald Trump, I think Trump wins 10 times out of 10. I mean, Comey wins 10 times out of 10.
Still accurate.
Yeah. So here's the thing.
Holds up.
Like, so first of all, it was 2017 when I said it. But I cannot begin to tell you, I mean, like, literally people are tweeting at me that they hope my dogs get hit by cars. I hope they, like death threat stuff, all sorts of crazy things, because I refuse to apologize for the statement. And
refuse to apologize for finding Donald Trump to be a person of less character than anyone.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is like, I have admitted that Comey has turned out to be, as you suggested, much more of a hack than we appreciated in 2017. Now, I should say, my wife worked for the Justice Department when Comey was there for John Ashcroft, and I had lots of conservative friends in and out of the Bush administration who had warned me that Comey's Boy Scout shtick was BS back then, right? So I've never had like this great esteem for Comey to begin with, but there is this very strange assumption out there that because I don't know if you know this, but I dislike Donald Trump, that must mean that I was all in on the Russiagate stuff, and the simple fact is I wasn't, and I also wasn't on the other side. I was like, I just basically kept my powder dry for most of Trump's presidency on the issue. I remember distinctly I wrote about it after the Trump Tower meeting, where I wrote a thing for the Corner at the time at National Review saying, hey, look, I've basically kept my powder dry until now, but one thing I don't think Trump's defenders can any longer say is that it is an outrageous assault and insult to Trump's character to suggest that he would collude with Russia, because we now know that he tried to, at least on some level, right?
To invoke the ancients, Charles Krauthammer, bungled collusion is still collusion.
Yeah, and, I mean, right.
The Trump Tower meeting was a crass and absurd effort, and shameful. And they lied about it. And then they lied about lying about it. And then my favorite was, and I'm sure I've told you this before, but it provided us the perfect framework for how Donald Trump lies about things. It didn't happen. Okay, it happened, but it was about adoption. Okay, it happened, and it was about getting dirt from Hillary Clinton, but we didn't know who the person was. Okay, it happened. We knew what it was about, and we knew who the person was, but the president didn't know about it. The candidate didn't know about it. Oh, okay, actually, he wrote the statement lying about it. Oh, so it was a lie from the beginning? Yes, but it's important that I lied about it because everybody else lies. Therefore, it is necessary. In order for me to tell the truth, I must lie. And the addicted partisanship said, well, we got to give it to him. At least only Trump can defeat the corrupt and evil media because he is corrupt and evil too. And I saw in that thing the real problem. But there's an OJ effect here. I don't know if you watched the great 30 for 30 documentary about OJ Simpson, but truly amazing filmmaking. Takes you from the Watts riots to the trial. It's a story about TV. It's a story about the news business. It's really, really good. And jurors voted to acquit OJ Simpson, who knew that he was guilty, right? But you can say that you don't think that the prosecution made its case. You can say that you want to stick it to the man and still think that the person is guilty. And the prosecution of Donald Trump was not just bungled. It was James Comey's capacity to overestimate himself was, whether it was from the bedside of Alberto Gonzalez or from the bedside of John Ashcroft in the hospital to his final undoing, was a story of excessive self-regard. All of this stuff is true, but part of the sad story here is you could have opened a jacket on Donald Trump, and the Durham report says as much. There was other stuff that you could have started an investigation with and started pulling thread on. You did not need to go to, as Kanye would say, DEFCON 3. There are other ways that this could go, like the public utterances and reported actions of Donald Trump and his advisors.
Well, so this is part of the thing that gets me somewhat vexed and dyspeptic, is that it was not outlandish to think that Trump was up to some sort of no good, because the way the Louise Mensch craziness. I mean, one of the great tells that someone is not gathering the facts judicially is when they start talking about how the sergeant of arms at the Supreme Court is going to execute somebody. He's like, yeah, if they got that wrong, maybe they got some other things wrong too. And Rachel Maddow, like, we didn't need to know that Rachel Maddow. We didn't need the Durham report to find out that Rachel Maddow gets way over her skis all the time. But the I have zero problem being outraged at how the FBI and the DOJ handled a lot of this stuff, right? There's just this weird thing going on among many of my very good friends on the right about this rage of I told you so stuff, where they go back and forth between criticizing media who got a lot of this stuff wrong, which is fine by me. Boring, but fine by me. I mean, like, by all means, expose people who say stupid things. And saying heads should roll, right? That's Nikki Haley's thing. Heads should roll because of this. Tuberville is saying people need to be arrested. And like, there's lots of gnashing of teeth and rending of cloth about the fact that the people responsible haven't paid a price. Well, most of these guys were fired from the FBI.
Some prosecuted, right? Very few of them. Yeah, I get that they get to be on CNN or MSNBC a lot, but like,
this is not the career path that they wanted. I don't think anybody at the FBI right now is thinking, gosh, those guys really successfully pulled that off.
They nailed it. Right.
Comey's
no one in the
career
intelligence community.
Yeah. I mean, it's like lots of people's careers are in tatters and they're getting consolation prizes. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be even more ridiculed. That's fine. Whatever. Maybe they, everyone should go issue apologies. But there is this otherworldly sense. I mean, like, there are a lot of people who are insisting that because of the revelations in the Durham report, that people need to be arrested. And they seem to have missed the point that Durham had the power to arrest people, and
he's a prosecutor.
He's a prosecutor and chose not to. Right. And so there's just this weird, and I should not be surprised by it at this point, but this weird talking to people whose critical faculties about the stuff that they want to hear just will not engage. That is just very weird to me.
But some of it is, let's give Coach Tuberville credit for the possibility that he may think that way. That may be that those may be the limits of his faculties.
That's right.
That's right. He may. It's sort of like, duped or cynical, and that is the main test in American political life today when you're trying to adjudge the character of people who are wrong. Are they mistaken or are they cynical about it? And if we take Hunter Biden's the many travails of Hunter Biden, how much of what Republicans are doing with Hunter Biden is because they believe that serious wrongs have been done? How much of it is to create an alternate narrative to the Donald Trump narrative? I don't know. For everybody, it's a little of both. But to what degree? And you think about James Comey and not James Comey. Sorry. Comer from Kentucky, the head of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer. So he has the right-wing media baying after him like a pack of hounds to tell them the truth that everybody already knows, that Joe Biden directed Hunter Biden to rake up money from unsavory people around the world, and then Joe Biden did favors for him. They know it to be true in the same way that Democrats absolutely knew that Donald Trump had cavorted with micturating prostitutes in Moscow. And they believed everything. They believed stuff that wasn't even true, and they knew it in their bones. So if you're Comer, you have those people hounding you. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene on your committee who wants to bring Hunter Biden, the prostitutes that Hunter Biden patronized, into the House of Representatives to testify. What do you say to her, right? If you're Comer and you want to stay in your job and you want to keep this high-profile celebrity position that you've got, and this is where people like Adam Schiff went in the ditch on the Russia stuff, you've got to give them something. You've got to give them something. So you just keep ratcheting it up all the time. You create false expectations that cannot be delivered. I've said to you before, if you took the Bob Mueller report, unleaked, untrammeled, untouched, and dropped it like a bomb, it would have hit real hard, right?
Yeah.
It would have hit real hard. But what had happened? You mentioned Maddow. So many people had watered down, had raised expectations and failed to deliver.
Right. Will the president be?
Walls are closing in. Will the president be arrested today? No, probably not. I don't think the president's going. Let alone that the Senate Sergeant of Arms will execute Steve Bannon in a dungeon beneath the United States Senate. That will the president be arrested or charged here? I remember going on TV. People ask me that question. No, the president will not be arrested or charged today. So I think the way that they ruined their story and what they wanted to say about Donald Trump was one of the really unfortunate intersections of the way the media and politics interact now. And with the media doing the job of politicians and politicians doing the job of the media. So if what you want to do is provide a steady stream of, hey, well, what about this? Hey, let's leak this. Hey, what about this? Keep the drumbeat going, keep the narrative going, and push back against the other side's narrative, you're actually harming your ability to do the thing that you're supposed to do in your job.
I like the phrase micturating prostitutes. But I think given some of the allegations, you should refer to them as retromingently micturating prostitutes. Because for those who don't know, retromingent animals are animals that urinate backwards. So there you have that. Okay, so we've solved all these issues. We have people yelling at their daughter in the back seat. Put your headphones on. Let's get to the Peruvian flake, the Bolivian marching powder, the uncut, pure rank punditry that only the likes of us can do, and maybe 50 or 75 other people. GOP primaries.
Oh, yeah.
What the hell's going on? I mean, go with it any way you want. I can ask a specific question. The DeSantis' campaign needs a redo when he hasn't launched a campaign yet. Is Trump the undisputed and unconquerable frontrunner? Go any way you want to go.
So in February, we were told that it was a two-man race. It was Trump and DeSantis, and that was it. And then in March and early April, we were told it's actually a one-man race. Donald Trump has already won, and the rest of this is just window dressing. And DeSantis has failed. And now we are, of the media narratives, they love how the mighty have fallen. We love how the mighty have fallen. Our second favorite is, of course, the comeback kid. And now we are entering Ron DeSantis, the comeback kid narrative around the race. The narrative shapes the election. There is no question about it, but the narrative is not the election. And one of the things that people in my business tend to forget is, so if we take South Carolina, who is the person most likely to win the South Carolina Republican primary as of today? Donald Trump. He's got the governor of South Carolina. He's got Lindsey Graham, God bless him, who he's racked up these endorsements. He's put the people in place, and the rest of the vote looks likely to be divided between the former governor, Nikki Haley, and popular sitting Senator Tim Scott. And they'll divide up the anti-Trump vote. DeSantis won't be able to get in, and Trump wins. Maybe that is true. But it is also true that whether it's Brian Kemp or somebody else, that there will be other players in the race. It is also true that between now and I'll just say it again, and people tire of me saying it, but I have to keep reminding people, over the next 8 months, there are only pseudo events, right? The debates start will Trump stiff Fox and not do the first debate? Will he do the debate? There'll be a lot of talk about whether or not Trump does the debate. But there only 2 debates have been scheduled. And the debates are the first inflection point. What we have right now is nothing, right? What we have is Ron DeSantis. Donald Trump didn't attend an Iowa event on Saturday, citing weather. Was it really this? Was it really that? Who knows? That's why we have Drucker, right? We have David Drucker for this very purpose, to go out and tell us the difference between the horsepucky and the real stuff, and what really matters and what really doesn't. But the shape of the Republican race will be all conjecture. And again, the conjecture will shape the reality, will be all conjecture until the first debate. And then things will start in a different way. But it doesn't really start until August. It doesn't really start until the fall. And that's just the truth. I think Ron DeSantis had a Kamala Harris problem. The expectations were so high, and So many in the Republican elite had determined that Ron DeSantis was the answer to the question. The expectations became way too great. And then, of course, in reality, he's a dude. It's just meatball, folks. He's out there he ends up being a person. The great thing about our presidential politics is everybody who gets to become president first must be humiliated by running for president. You must first be shamed. Donald Trump had to invite a woman to come up on stage and tug at his hair to prove that it was real, right? Like you first must humble yourself in front of voters before you are allowed to run for the big job. Because by the time you get to the general, there's no more humbling, right? Then it's just higher and high, greater and greater, wonderful and wonderful. This is the period of time where they've got to pick what with the chickens for a while. And I think DeSantis, the very long way of saying, DeSantis didn't stumble. DeSantis was revealed as the governor of Florida, right? He's a guy, he's a dude. And he is trying to put a team together and making mistakes and doing some things right. What we'll see between now and August is, can he do it? And what is, can he build a coalition that includes not MAGA, because MAGA already has a candidate. It's not MAGA. Can he build a coalition that includes? I'm trying to think who would be the end. Can Andy McCarthy and David French both support Ron DeSantis, right? Like, can he build a coalition that includes traditional conservatives, law and order types? Can he put together the pieces of the old Reagan coalition, the traditional Republican coalition that George Bush won with? Can he do that? And it's an open question. It's made more complicated by the fact that, did you hear Rick Perry say he was thinking about it? Third run?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Much like the cabinet departments that he would eliminate, there would be three. But
Oops would play prominently in all of it. Yeah.
Oops would play prominent. Oops, I did it again. But why is Vivek Ramaswamy, is that his last name?
Mm-hmm.
Why is he running? Why would Rick Perry run? Why are some of these people running? Are some of them stalking horses for Donald Trump that are trying to muddy up the space so that they divide up the vote more? Are they auditioning to be running mates? What is going on? Here's a little secret. They don't know either. When Herman Cain declared for the presidency, Herman Cain did not say, well, it's a clear shot. The former CEO of the worst pizza chain in America, have a clear shot to the Oval Office. So you start running and then it starts happening. And then you know what you think when it starts happening? Maybe it was ordained. This is the Santorum effect, the Gingrich effect. You see it over and over again. Like, maybe it is me. And you go from and heck, it's Trump. You go from what's a stunt and something you're trying out. You try it out. You really like it. The polls say it's something good and you get in. So this is a very long way of saying who the hell knows.
Yeah. And you also surround yourself. I used to call it the Huntsman effect. You surround yourself with very sophisticated people who are perfectly willing to charge you large amounts of money to tell you how the country needs you.
Totally.
And
highly compensated, attractive, brilliant people with lengthy resumes who will day after day tell you it's right around the corner. Right. It's right around the corner.
And you get to tell your kids, shh, there's some people who are coming here to explain why daddy needs to be president. And that just feels kind of cool. But all right, so
yeah.
What I'm maybe misreading in your is it Paean? Paen? Paen? Pine? Oh, Paean?
Paean?
In your homage,
yes.
In your homage to Wait and See, to the summer of Sitzkrieg, the phony war, right? Is that no one wants to fully commit to one strategy or another strategy yet because they don't know how things are going to play out, right? So does this mean that Nikki Haley and all the rest, whoever they are are making a mistake, are not making a mistake. That this is a wise strategy for them not to make a big deal of Donald Trump's vulnerabilities right now? Or is Chris Christie, who I'm not, I don't think anyone can accuse me of being a Chris Christie booster. But Chris Christie, as you know, says the only way you kill Dracula is by putting a stake through his heart. You have to go on offense and you have to take go on attack. And the idea that a president of the United States gets a verdict against him in a civil trial where a jury found that he had sexually assaulted somebody, where his top lawyer, in effect, Rudy Giuliani, is at least allegedly, I'm not saying it's all true. This lawsuit against Rudy
Isn't
Giuliani.
that a doozy?
Yeah, we will circle around to that momentarily. I just talked about that at great length on Glop yesterday. So, but
you also make Guy work in the nude.
Yeah, there are things I'm never going to ask Guy to do that woman got asked to do. Right now you hear Guy just sighing with enormous relief. Like, these seem like good openings, particularly for a female candidate for the Republican nomination, to go on offense a little bit, right? Oh, that Giuliani in this thing, just to close the circle, allegedly, again, I'm not sure I buy it, but allegedly told his assistant, if you know anybody who needs a pardon, send them my way because we're selling them for $2 million a piece and we're going to split the money with Trump. Now, given that Trump accused Ted Cruz's father of being in on the assassination of Kennedy and suggested that Ben Carson was a pedophile based on far flimsier information, it seems to me that it's certainly fair game to go after Trump on some of these things. And back in the before times, when you were seeking the Republican nomination or the Democratic nomination, there was a tendency to attack your opponents in order to gain advantage on them. And that seems to have gone out the window. And what I'm hearing from you is maybe that is tactically wise at this point because you don't want to commit to a strategy when you don't want to see how things play out. And what I would respond to that is not committing to a strategy is committing to a strategy, right? Because these opportunities to go on the attack have to be in the day, in the breaking news stuff. Like Pence needs his quote in the lead or in the first paragraph of the AP write-up of some of these things. Nikki, if they want to be part of that news cycle, rather than part of the Republicans still refuse to criticize Trump cycle, they need to commit. And lack of commitment is a commitment all to itself. Response.
As the great philosopher Geddy Lee told us, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. I think it's like this. Pence, just to take the Pence case, Pence has been willing to not in every matter, right? Because he doesn't want to be a doll where you pull the string and he criticizes Donald Trump, because then that's all they come to you for, right? But Pence has been willing to say stern stuff about Trump. But so think about it this way. Why do you attack your opponent in a primary? To hurt them and bring attention to yourself. You want to harm them, and then you want some of the light of so if you have a big story, a scandal around a candidate, you want some of the attention to reflect back to you so that you get in on it, you come in on the attack, and you nose your way into the story, and you get higher name identification.
You break off a piece of that giant PR Kit Kat bar for yourself. Yes.
Right. But what if the first part isn't true? What if it doesn't hurt the person? And the reality for the Republican Party is this. The Washington Post, most recent Washington Post ABC News poll said that of the 54 or 56% of Republicans who said that Donald Trump should be criminally prosecuted for his efforts to disrupt the 2020 presidential election, that of those people, right, 1 in 5 said they were going to vote for him anyway if it was them or Joe Biden.
That's like in 2016, 10% of the electorate who voted for Trump said that if their candidate won, they would be disappointed by the results.
Right. Because a lot of Americans are regard what is coming, the plurality outcome, not the most probable outcome, or the most probable outcome, but by only a plurality of probability of a rematch between these two figures. Many Americans will despair. Many Americans will wonder how it is possible that we have a system that has become so broken that you end up with these people for your nominees a second time. There are plenty of those people. And then those people will say, and this is, by the way, part of what the Republicans are trying to do with the Hunter Biden business, which is what they did with Hillary Clinton. Oh, everybody's bad. Oh, they're all corrupt. They're all bad. So why don't you just vote for the policy set that you prefer? And this is the analogy that I've often used is the way that American politics goes. There's two guys swimming in the pool, and they both micturate. And then they look at the persuadable electorate and say, "Who wants to go swimming? Who wants to join us here in the pool?" And people say, "I'm good. I think I'll pass." So you have most Republicans would like somebody other than Trump to be the nominee. All Republicans.
Then why is he at 60% in the polls?
Most Republicans would like Donald Trump, somebody other than Donald Trump, to not be the nominee.
Mm-hmm.
All Republicans know that Donald Trump is a bad guy. Some like that he is a bad guy. Some are willing to accept his badness as an alternative to having a Democrat be president. Some of those people believe that only Trump can win, right? In Guys and Dolls, Big Julie, the mobster, says he goes, "I have a perfect record, 28 arrests, no convictions." And the idea that Donald Trump is lucky or somehow can skate through this, that he has this aura around him. And this is, of course, why Iowa and New Hampshire will be so enormously important, which is if Trump wins Iowa and New Hampshire, well, it'll be over, right? South Carolina it'll all be over because Republicans will say, well, here he goes again. So I wrote a piece last week, the Republican establishment case for laying down for Trump. Well, he's going to win anyway. If we fight him, it only gets worse, right? If we fight him, and when Steve Daines, the head of the Republican Senatorial Committee, Steve Daines, a good and decent person, senator from Montana, said, "Yep, I'm in for Trump." You're like, whoa, it's not Memorial Day of the year before. Calculus is pretty simple. He's got to try to get Senate candidates nominated. And he's got to try to get non-awful Senate candidates nominated. So if he can make peace with Trump early, then maybe Trump will not harass him in the same way that he did Rick Scott in 2022. And you end up with all these goofy Herschel Walker, Mehmet Oz, all this trash. So you try to make an accommodation. But here's the next problem with that. Trump still trashes you, right? He still wrecks you. He still ruins you. So there's stages of acceptance that are going on among Republicans right now. They would like to teleport to the convention, right? They would like to just go bango, right to Milwaukee. It's all done. Yes, we can accept Donald Trump. The living through it is the hard part, just as we're watching. Why is Kevin McCarthy in a different posture when it comes to the debt ceiling today than he was before? Because Donald Trump told the Freedom Caucus in the CNN town hall, and told the Republican members of the Senate, I'd have a default. I would have a default. It won't be as bad as people say, so just have a default. So now you're Kevin McCarthy. What do you tell Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene and everybody else? So it's this is the reality. Trump is so costly and so burdensome and so damaging to the people around him. There is no successful path to survival by just placating him. He just eventually has to be fought. What Chris Christie is toying with doing is taking an enormous chance. And the enormous chance is, I will go into the corona of the sun. I will go and get all the attention that comes from attacking Donald Trump. And that means that every time Donald Trump does something, the New York Times, the Associated Press, the Washington Post, Politico, everybody is going to say, tell us again why you think Donald Trump is a bad person. And it will get Chris Christie attention, and it will not endear him to those persuadables that are willing to accept Trump and going through this process of trying to reconcile themselves to, okay, I guess I could do it again. He would not endear him to those people because, as Noah Rothman wrote a great piece not too long ago, Republican voters are not in a reality-based universe yet. They are not in a reality-based universe because what they want is, I want someone other than Trump, but I don't want that person to attack Trump. I want someone other than Trump, but I don't want that person to attack Trump. What do you want? High tax? What do you want? Low taxes or lots of government spending? Both. I want a Trump-friendly alternative to Trump. Well, that's not, you can't have that. What I would do if I were running for president would be immediately withdraw. But if I didn't, what I would say is, when asked whether I would vote for Donald Trump, I would just say, absolutely not. I would not support him under any circumstances. He is unfit for any office. And that would be it. And there wouldn't be a follow-up. There wouldn't be a let's talk about it some more. Let's keep going back. I would make the big bet. And this is where it gets scary, because in life, most of what we do is the ad hocratic, trying to do the best we can in a series of choices to balance competing goods to get to a good place, whether you're raising children or running a business or whatever. Politics is like sports in this way. Do you pull the goalie? Do you you have to make big risky choices, and you have to do so. Second place isn't worth anything, right? And if you want to win, you may have to do things that make it very unlikely that you will finish second. It may be a choice between trying to win and being willing to bomb out of the race. And the last thing I'll say about that is, it doesn't matter how many Republicans get in the presidential race. Doesn't matter if it's 7 or 70. What matters is when they get out. And everybody who is thinking about running for president, everybody who's thinking about funding people who are running for president, everybody needs to understand that if you're not likely to win and you're still in the race on the 1st of March, you're doing it wrong, right? So it's not when they get in, it's when they get out. And the Marco Rubio effect, hanging around. Well, I got to hang around till Florida. I'm going to wait and see. It was Mitt Romney, Ted Cruz, and John Kasich in the last leg of the Republican primaries who guaranteed Donald Trump's victory. Mitt Romney came out. He gave this huge speech, trashing, roasting Donald Trump, mocking his business acumen, talking about what a characterologically mutated human being he was, and all of that stuff. And then at the end, you know what he said? But I don't know. Vote how you want to do what you wanted. But I'm not telling you how to vote. You do what you want to do. And the best part was, in some states, it may be better for you to vote for John Kasich, and in other states, it may be better for you to vote for for Ted Cruz, which would be like, in some states, it may be better for you to get the soy dog. In other states, it may be better to get the barbecued ribs. It doesn't matter what you want, but please vote strategically to try to soak up some delegates so we can block them at the convention. No, guys, that's not how that goes, because Republicans have, by the way, this year, all these winner-take-all primaries. They have made it a faster drop. The polar plunge is more intense this cycle than even before. There is no excuse for Republicans. Get in if you want to get in, but there's no excuse for hanging around.
So I'm just trying to distill, what was the actual answer to the question about whether or not it was smart to stay to keep your options open versus commit to attacking? Does it depend on the candidate? Like, should Nikki have a different approach? As you know, I have some vestigial fondness for Nikki because my wife worked for her for so long. I'm very disappointed in how Nikki's handled this, but I'm also kind of perplexed, and maybe it has to do with the nature of the electorate. I'm sure it has to do with the nature of the electorate, but it seems to me that if I were running, if I identified as female, and I was running as a sort of Liddy Dole Lane conservative, traditional conservative, but feminist overtones kind of thing, I'd have
Jack
something.
Jack Donaghy named his baby Liddy, with Avery Jessup, the host of Hotbox, named their baby Liddy in her honor.
I should pop open a bottle of Donaghy Estates. That and which Robert Parker said tastes like Satan's urine after eating a healthy portion of asparagus. Anyway, be that as it may, there's a lot of urine theme in today's episode.
It's like a glop. It's like a glop number one.
But like, even if you believe in keeping your options open, responding to the allegations against Trump that a jury ratified by saying everybody has the right to defend themselves seems like you can't later say you were outraged by that behavior if in real time as the story is unfolding you can say let's wait for the jury, right? But like once the jury speaks, you have to go on record. Do you believe the jury? Do you not believe the jury? Do you think this case was legit? Do you not? Whatever. Do you think the behavior is bad? And to not even give if the allegations are as true, which a jury found, that would be very troubling. Just feels like she's running for vice president at this point, which is a problem.
There's no excuse for a Republican to support Donald Trump. There's no excuse to do that. He tried to steal a second term in office. He is manifestly unfit for the position. And it's just true, right? There's you can, as a Republican, you could make an excuse for voting for him in the general to say, yeah, I know, but I can't do Biden. I can't do that stuff. But there is not like the response that you're giving or propose suggests that this is a person who is weighing her options. Well, I've thought about it, and this is bad, and I don't like it. He did a bad thing, and this is bad. Because what she hasn't said and won't say is, I will not support this person. I will not support this person. He is unfit for this position. What Nikki Haley's trying to do is very obviously run a campaign that ignores Trump and treats DeSantis as the front runner, right? She's trying to do that reflected light game. Go in and punch DeSantis, and DeSantis's super PAC is obliging her by running attack ads against her, right? That she goes in and pokes at DeSantis when he has a stumble and gets in the story and goes and stands next to him. So she is doing that, but ignoring Trump. And if the thesis is either Trump wins and she can get back in his good graces as his running mate, or that Trump is done in, right? That he is the grand jury in Georgia or federal charges or something else takes Trump out of the picture, that she will be on a better footing to fight DeSantis. But that's pretty clearly what it is. I'm more interested in two other people. I think Haley's shown us what she's about, what she's doing. I'm more interested in Tim Scott, and I'm more interested in Brian Kemp. Tim Scott is putting together a very interesting team. Did you see that Bill Haslam signed on as his national chairman? Bill Haslam is no joke. He is a real dude, and he is a clear-eyed sort of conservative. He's a Christian guy. He's all of that stuff. He's the people. Why am I drawing a blank on his name? But the people that he has put together from the world of Republican consultants, and those are serious and good. It's a serious, good squad. So I'm looking at Tim Scott. Maybe he's going to make a move at some point. I'm looking at Brian Kemp. Same story. He's got putting together a lot of money, putting together a lot of impressive people. Those look like to me two guys that are looking potentially for the opening. That there's going to be a moment. And not to recycle my answer, until they get on the stage together, right? the Rand Paul could be president thing was true right until he walked out on a debate stage and people said, oh, no. Most people who will vote do not really know any of these people. Most of the people who previously said that they like Ron DeSantis didn't know anything about Ron DeSantis, except for that they had heard that people hated, that the right people hated him and that he was famous. So the getting to know you phase of this doesn't really start till the fall.
All right. Do you have to run? Okay. We should. This podcast is nothing if not fair and balanced, or some other word that means sometimes neither of those things. So, but we should cover to some extent that other guy who's running. Obviously, my and AB's view that he wasn't going to run is hard to defend at this point. I'm just going to say it.
Jury's still out. Jury's still out. We'll see.
Yeah, but I think at least most of the times I woefully, I made woeful mistakes about prediction. I did include at least some of those times the possibility that he doesn't run because of physical problems of one kind.
Yeah, it's very rough.
And that said, what is wrong with the world that we have to choose between? I mean, as I put it in my LA Times column like a week ago, we now have polling that says a majority of Americans think that the current president does not have the mental or physical fortitude to be president of the United States. Never mind be president again, right? I mean, and someone get this guy a portrait of a really young Joe Biden and put it in his attic or something, because otherwise he's only going to get older. And there's nothing ageist about this, and I'm done sort of. I mean, I'm actually kind of surprised how few people with a straight face can hurl the charge of ageism in this, because it's just so obviously a hackish talking point at this point. But regardless, so we got a guy who Americans think is unfit for who's unworkable for the job, and then we got a guy that a majority of Americans, by a smaller margin, I should have to say, think that his most likely opponent is unfit for the job. Now, you better than I, but I am perfectly capable of explaining the whys of this. But if you pan back and you look at this as a broader picture, America's decision tree has just gone frickin' awry, right? I mean, like, this should not be like it. Like, if what was the name of the guy who ran GE? Jack Welch. If Jack Welch said, look, if Barbie dolls with hands coming out of their foreheads and their asses on backwards keep coming off the assembly line, there's a problem somewhere in the manufacturing process. And I don't know where it is, but you people are supposed to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. If all of the jets keep exploding, there's a mistake somewhere. If this country is going to have a corrupt septuagenarian guy under multiple indictments run against a guy who looks like when he finishes his speech, he doesn't know where to get lime jello at the home, something's gone wrong in American democracy. But that looks like, I mean, if you had to bet right now, isn't that the most likely thing that we're going to have?
So I think Donald Trump is the most likely person to be the Republican nominee, but not by a lot, right? If I had the choice between Trump and the field at this point, depending on the odds I got, I might want the field, right? Because Trump has a lot of vulnerabilities, and we haven't tested the premise yet. We have developed a premise. Republicans have developed a premise around Trump, but we haven't tested it yet and really done it. So I don't know. But yes, the plurality probability is of a rematch. Here's the thing. And I know that this is old talking points, and I know that you agree. But our primary system, this is what you get, right? This is the logical result of a hideously bad, terribly broken primary system that came out of the post 68 and post Watergate changes that happened in the country 2 generations ago. And it's the primary system is representative. It is democratic, but not representative. If the reality is that you cannot get nominees who are representative of what large chunks of the American people want, you have a serious problem, right? You have a really serious problem if the system cannot produce representative results. Joe Biden and Donald Trump are not representative of their parties. They do not look like, they do not think like what their parties are. And the problem, not to invoke Yuval, I'll take the first Yuval Levin invocation today, peace be upon him, to say institutional reform is essential, right? We have to be willing to change these systems. And looking at Republicans, they're barreling toward their primaries, but have not addressed the primaries themselves. In fact, they've made it worse. They've made the existing problems worse. On the Democratic side, imagine how Democrats are going to feel in June of next year if Donald Trump's not the nominee, right? How will Democrats feel if they go, wait, what? It's not going to be Trump? It won't be Trump? Because the entire premise of Joe Biden's candidacy is, so first we should say, he is an incumbent president. And he, I assume, in private is more lucid at moment. I'm sure he has his good days and his bad days. I'm sure he is right. I'm sure he is more competent and lucid at times when he is not. He's never been a good speech maker. I'm sure that in private settings he is can do better, I assume. So if you're a Democrat, you say, look, he's the incumbent president. He has the party apparatus behind him. He has everything behind him. If we fight him, and by the way, watching Republicans the thirst for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to just the thirsty desire for more RFK Jr. Sean Hannity having him on TV. Talk about the corruption in the CIA. And the funny thing for me is, if Robert F. Kennedy switched parties and filed as a Republican and ran, he would be outpolling Nikki Haley. I guarantee you. I guarantee you that if he came in, because it'd be like, hey, look, the guy makes sense on vaccines and the Kennedy assassination. So and plus QAnon foretold the return of his uncle. So there's already a built-in constituency there. But
no, not his uncle, his nephew, right?
Oh, his nephew. That's right. He was
on special report.
It was JFK Jr.
He was on special report last night, and RFK and Brett interviewed him, and it was interesting. I tweeted, I did not expect that the true heir to the Ron Paul legacy would be Bobby Kennedy's son. I mean, he is straight up a, Seymour Hersh is Cy Hersh is keeping his powder dry, not telling you how bad it really is, kind of guy.
Exactly.
And
who's being naive now, Cy Hersh?
Yeah, and but I'm sure he helped himself on the special report last night. It was interesting.
But anyway, that was just me saying. That was me saying the appetite among Democrats to have a contested primary, to have that, is low because they're afraid of Trump. It's interesting. Democrats are both deeply afraid of Donald Trump, but they're also oddly confident that they can beat him, which puts them in a weird spot. But the press, I hate to retreat to media criticism because it is the first refuge of the pundit scoundrel. But the press's failure to cover Joe Biden's infirmity, obvious, evident infirmity, to the degree that it should be covered, is a dereliction, right? The hard truth to tell the American people is that the frontrunners for both parties' nominations are not up to the job for various reasons. And that's a terrible place to have to tell people they are. But we're not going to fix what's wrong with America by ignoring the stuff that is obvious, right? We can't keep doing Emperor's New Clothes based on negative partisanship and the weaponized, motivated reasoning.
All right, just because I feel it's a disservice to our listeners if we don't at least mention, we are doing this. The podcasting software is called Riverside. It's like fancy Zoom for podcasting. And your name ID that you typed into your screen is Big Enos. Yes. And I want people to be very clear. I said Big Enos, Enos, who was a character from Smokey and the Bandit.
And Smokey and the Bandit 2.
And Little Enos was Paul Williams. And we got into it as we were preparing for this. We were mocking Adam and Guy for knowing nothing about American canon. And at least, well, they're both immigrants, so I mean, they have some excuse.
Yeah, what can you do? But
at least Adam likes the country of his birth, unlike Guy. So I had said that they were the villains of Smoking the Bandit, and you took great exception to this. And
hardly were the Enoses, the Eni were the villains. They were a plot device, a hilariously dressed plot device. People have not seen it. They are wild Texan. They captured the oil boom Texas outsized personality. They wore matching suits. I think they're father and son, big crazy hats, Cadillac with steer horns on the front. And they were in the Cannonball. So in the Cannonball Run, Jamie Farr is the sheik who provides the money that is the impetus for Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. to dress as priests and drive across the country in a Ferrari, among other things. For Mary Lou Henner and Shirley MacLaine to dress as nuns to drive across the country. So they are the impetus for Jerry Reed and Burt Reynolds to go on their daring race across the nation, to enjoy the full fruits of the Eisenhower interstate system. The villain in Smokey and the Bandit is Jackie Gleason, Sheriff Buford T. Justice, and his amiable, incompetent son, who was supposed to marry Sally Field, and from whose wedding the bandit carried Sally Field away, which leads to their romance. And I would just say this to Hollywood. Why can't we do movies like that anymore? Where are fun movies? Where are the fun movies? I guess they're on TV. But where are fun, goofy, enjoyable films that my complaint, my kvetching about the world of comedy today? You don't need to teach me a lesson. You don't need to have larger construct. You don't need to be arch. You could just be funny. You could put people in funny circumstances. You could put them in cool cars, and it would be enough. It would be enough.
So I brought this up because I wanted to apologize to you. You were correct that Jackie Gleason is more of the villain. But I mean, again, villain is just sort of misapplied word for a movie of such joyous Americana.
The antagonist. Could we? Yeah, we could call Jackie Gleason the antagonist,
and or maybe even the beloved antihero. But yes. The Enoses, the Eni, are yes. The MacGuffin creators. They're the ones who create the desire to do the race, do the bootlegging run in the first place to get Coors beer. Anyway, I just, part of the reason I bring it up is I love Smoking the Bandit. Huge part of my childhood. Pod, who we've name checked twice now at least, he went on a rant about a year ago about Smoking the Bandit, about how Smoking the Bandit was basically from a time the characters of Smoking the Bandit basically are MAGA voters, right? All of them
in the South, white dudes
who and his point was, if I'm remembering it correctly, was that like those people used to be a lot of fun, right? There was a certain of like fun to those cultural byways, and I'm sure there still is, and I'm sure there are heavy people out there, but the cultural representation of them is just never fun anymore. And whether it's Ozark or just go down a list, anybody who lives in that demographic profile is either struggling with the fact that the people all around them are bad people or that they're bad people themselves. And I think that's part of a problem that we kind of need to kind of figure out. I mean, the GOP used to represent those, try to steal those guys and represent those guys in a fun way, and now everything's dark and conspiratorial. And I don't know how you fix that.
Well, part of the consequences of living in a social justice oriented culture is that everything must be politicized and everything must be scored on its value. Art cannot exist just to delight or entertain if it must be scored for its relative political value. And people who make movies and make TV shows have spouses and they have children who want to know what they did in the war, right? What did you do in the war? And you can't say, I don't know. We got together a big, crazy bunch of people and a bunch of cars. We wrecked several, and it was a blast, and it sold, and people loved it. This is the Green Acres phenomenon, when CBS was in last place and Green Acres got on the air, and all of a sudden it was like, whoa! And this was, by the way, part of the phenomenon of the beginning of Fox News. Put it out there, and there's this huge untapped audience, and people love it, and all this stuff. But now, if you have been trained in and also are constantly held accountable to questions of social justice, how can you possibly make a movie that has as its hero not only a white dude, but a white dude who throws over social convention? Like the Burt Reynolds character in that movie, and a lot of the characters that Burt Reynolds played. What's the point? I don't care about the system. I don't care about
a lot of the characters were Burt Reynolds, just in
we're simply Burt. That's right, exactly. It's like Tony Danza. What should we call you in this show? Let's keep it with Tony. I think we'll just call you. We'll call you Tony in this show. How do you like that? But though in the end, the movie The End, Burt Reynolds is excellent and has and in Longest Yard and
he's made some great movies. I'm
North Dallas 42,
but he monetized being Burt Reynolds.
Yes. Exactly. The fringe buckskin jumpsuit was part of the story. But if you make a movie who does not, if you make a movie, what if we just thought about more recently? Did you ever see the Van Wilder movies that had like caught it on cable? You would not make that movie now. You certainly wouldn't make Animal House now. You wouldn't make. I mean, and I guess the point is the change has been relatively recent. The change has been relatively recent, and this is why the Oscars are dead. This is why awards are dead. This is why all this stuff is dead, is because if art has to be political, look, if you have art that is profit-based, art will sneak in, right? Art will still sneak in because it may be crass and it may be commercial, but it will still sneak in because you're trying to please the audience. But if your first consideration is that it must be politically virtuous, that this is why so much right-wing entertainment is terrible, is because if you start with the first premise, first it must be right-wing. Well, you know what? It's not always going to line up. What's funny, what's entertaining is not always going to line up with your values, and you have to be willing to go where the story goes. It just won't work that way. And I think now, so this is a long way of saying the problem on the right of entertainment needing to be politically, to cohere politically, is now everywhere. And it's boring and it's lame, and I wish they would stop that.
I agree with that. All right, we've gone very long. Adam and Guy are going to be very mad at me.
You're not going to leave out the Enoses, so you did the right thing.
But I take their rage as a badge of honor, because that's how politics works today.
That's right.
And I will point out, just a matter of trivia, did you know that they offered Jackie Gleason points? He was going to they offered him profit sharing on the movie, and he said, no way, this thing's not going to, whatever. So he just took the salary, cost him millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars. There you go. There you go.
All right, my friend. Wonderful to see you. And you'll be back again, because it's a job requirement. And you are pulling away in the category of most frequent Remnant guests. You are the Professor Munger of Econ Talk for this podcast. I think Munger has been on Econ Talk 8 trillion times or something like that.
I just want to be the Dennis Farina. That's all I'm looking for. Just the Dennis Farina.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
You bet.